for right now, and bands and restaurants. The list is endless. Planet Green Trees would be one, arguably, but we're staying very, limited people in social distancing. But the point is that conceptually, the idea of being able to reach people via internet and have people be able to interact is a potentially a thing of the future for entertainment. Would you agree with that, Earl? Do you know what I'm saying?
Are you saying the future is going to be a virtual?
I'm saying to you that the idea that a particular speaker, artist, whatever, that could do a live,
sure,
could reach so many more people than they would theoretically if they were calling them to one particular location. You know what I'm saying? On any given day over, if properly. And I just wondered, like, it's obviously something that's available to people, and more people are doing it. The question of how many, get people attention. Anyways, it was just an interesting phenomenon, especially in light of the no gathering of people more than 10 or whatever it may be. And how this, we do this anyways, but it serves as a vehicle to still interact with 1,000 people, 500 people, or whatever, whoever may be listening, and, attempting to provide some entertainment or discussion that may interest people, especially now because there aren't places to go together, right? But certainly in a pool of individuals in their homes, it's a methodology where you can. We're not providing top-notch entertainment. We're rambling on about some stuff, but I'm saying it's a way to kind of get that community connection in a way, and it's kind of happening anyways before the front. The front end, obviously, more and more people with podcasts and new software that can do a number of tremendous things. It's just an interesting time to sit and think about, the music industry has been completely, evolving from, the product of the music being the purchase item to that being of virtually no value. It's like, digital, right? So, and then, of course, the compensation for those artists is exclusively in attendance at concert halls, right? And they're usually promoting, or they use the album to draw people to the music they produce to draw people to the concerts, and that's where the revenue is created. But I'm just saying, like, it's an interesting way, like a couch concert. You sit in your couch, and 4,000 through 3,000 people could watch a show that they'd never be gathered anyways. If you could potentially get quality music and something that for the artist's perspective may reach a ton of people. You know what I mean?
And I think within that, is that a cutoff?
Nope, it was a fake out.
I think within that, I think you're naturally seeing the opportunity within the obstacle there. There's within itself, there are some businesses that have to adapt and change their business model. And I think the virtual, the online, like even if you're in a band or if you're a coach or if you're a singer or any kind of artist, or if you did painting, now you have to rethink how you could survive.
Right.
And
because museums, right? Museums would be like less of a draw. I mean, at least right now, you know what I mean?
Which I think, and I wouldn't say it's. I think this is also pushing some people. Some people have been thinking about it. Some people don't have the time to keep going. Say you're a speaker, you're doing seminars, traveling from place to place, and you're very limited in time. Right. And now you're thinking a way to scale your business and doing it more virtual. So, I think it's going to get people to maybe push them to that side of actually doing it.
I mean, the speaker market is hugely. I mean, one of the markets is the cruise ships. You know what I mean? As many of those are these vacations or where people would otherwise be gathering. One of the draws is going to be the gathering of the for the purpose of the band. I mean, the family. Like the yacht rock and stuff like that. Oh, good. All right, is Jamie Lowell on? Okay,
well, Jamie and Amanda.
Oh, right, Jamie.
Excellent.
We didn't get it. Can they can hear us? I see thumbs up. Can you talk? You're allowed to talk. Can we hear you? Amanda, how are you? We're worried that you weren't gonna be able to join us.
You have to click the microphone button to talk. You have to unmute yourself.
Unmute it.
Technology. Look at this.
Wow.
Look at these people.
Well,
I think you guys can't hear me. I
hear you, Deb.
I said I don't think you guys could have heard me because I told you when I added Amanda on, I added Jamie on.
I didn't hear you.
I'm trying to put Rick on, but He's emailing Jim his Skype thing. He can't get on.
I feel like we're at the beginning of a really weird horror film.
Hold on, I want to talk about it. So we got a lot of. So I see that Eric Gunnels, who I talked to earlier, joined our crew here, and same with Daryl Berry. Maybe those two can get their guns out and fight about who can be the conservative in the conversation. But
I'm trying to get
kidding.
Daryl to call in, and he
well,
he's. I'm trying to coach him into doing it.
Eric, well, you know, one of the
Conservative commentary.
You know, I think we've in the past discussed gun issues with Eric, and I don't want to misspeak for him, but I remember just a general. And I didn't take a position. I'm not saying that I haven't, but just to play devil's advocate, we discussed the, gun rights issues in light of some of the school shootings and you know what just some of the cultural significance of it in America, of why guns have become such a topic of significance, and it's understood, but, I always joke with Eric that we got down to, like, it came down to that when there's when the world's at the end days, the guys with the guns are going to be able to get all the food, you know what I mean? And they're going to come over to their neighbors and not have a problem, and those that don't have guns, but that's what it was, they're stockpiling, forget the government, tyranny or whatever, it's really when it all hits the fan, like, your neighbor's garden and stuff like that. But so we talked today, and I talked today with Eric, and we were discussing, getting to the gun store to make sure we got, proper.
Hello, Rick.
Armed. All right, what do you know? Rick Thompson is joining us. You got to hit the mute button. We've learned, so you make sure so we can hear you. If there's a unmute.
Got to unmute yourself, Rick.
Still can't hear you.
Hit your little unmute button.
You got to unmute it somehow.
Growing pains. We're getting there.
We're getting there. There's a lot of technology going on at the same time. I'm pretty impressed.
Through crisis and hard times often comes great things. Right?
Eric, okay, so Eric, we're talking gun rights and in times of craze. I do think it's an interesting. I do think this raises another important issue, which I think is, I think the government to a certain extent is trying the best it can. I know Gretchen Whitmore has been identified as one of the governors in leadership who has taken the lead and getting out in front for the state's purposes. I know she's been battling with our esteemed president on things in Twitter wars. But there are a number of things that I think, as appropriately, would be discussed on this show regarding cannabis issues in the community. There's a couple that come to mind. One, which we're kind of on right now, is the concept and understanding of those particular individuals who are patients or caregivers and want to own a gun, right? Right now, the announcement across the state is, you got a crime going on near you? Police ain't coming. It's not that important to them. So, not to give anyone any ideas, but there's, of those caregivers that may be known in places, security is always critical. There's, thinking or believing that the police aren't going to go there and having a grow that is broken into, and caregivers fearing that they shouldn't have a gun because they don't go with caregiving, and, as we've discussed on other shows, it seems rather outrageous, doesn't it? I mean, talking about people that may be more subject to robbery, break-ins, and whatnot because of a ridiculous contemplation here. And as we are examining or seeing the impact of executive order under emergency rules, and realizing what awesome power the executive branch has, both at the state level for enforcing emergency rules and also at the federal level for enforcing emergency rules. I mean, for example, the executive branch at the federal level, $1.7 trillion recovery for the banking industry. That was done by executive order. And legislatively, there's the creation of the Corona Task Force and funds for that, executive order. Our governor has, made a number of pronouncements in regards to lawful behavior now under the circumstances, emergency status, certain people gathering, creating a crime for, and I'm not saying it's not appropriate, but it is not the normal way that lawmaking as Alan Pizer may say, sausage is made. You know, there's a process by which laws get passed and crimes get established. And this is not one of them. It's usually not the executive branch. The executive branch is supposed to enforce the laws the legislature makes them, but here we have the executive branch creating laws that are having a wide, sweeping impact. And I would suggest if we're going to do that, I mean, I don't know if anyone's stopping it, and there's a certain amount of authority via emergency situations, but if we're going to do that, could we not recognize potentially a class of individuals, even a in the terms of recreational, right? Because now we're not talking about those so famous words regarding the MMA, which is the MMA didn't legalize marijuana; it merely created a group of protections for a limited group of individuals for behavior that would otherwise be illegal. Now we have legalization. There's 12 plants theoretically that could be being grown in every single house, potentially subject to a break-in. The idea that someone would have to relinquish their Second Amendment right to protect their home at this point makes that particular policy decision absurd, as many other policy decisions that we're living under in this time seem even more absurd. And I want to talk specifically about some of the medical marijuana issues, but before I get to that, and I want to invite our people who are listening to chime in. If I stop talking, feel free. I may not stop talking, but I want you to chime in. But, like for example, this has nothing to do with medical marijuana, but just, holding up our current existing economic system, that we have this pandemic and there are certain individuals who are, unfortunately, those that are have a compromised immune systems, compromised respiratory systems, elderly, they're, in a category that are more susceptible to these diseases. It's terrible. But there's also all these other people that may or may not be in that category, but are going to be, affected by this pandemic because of the supply chain of medications that they need on a regular basis just to function, right? Like the idea that someone that needs insulin or someone that needs, prostate cancer drugs or whatever it may be that they're taking that's on there, and to be cut off from that is an absurd reality that we're living in. And when you hold it up to the light and think about how do we get here, it's that, in this case, the pharmaceutical companies, you can say it about the auto industry, you can say it about, telecom industry, you can say it about, it goes on and on and on. But at the end of the day, they're making exorbitant amounts of money. They're American companies. They're outsourcing the jobs to China to save money on the employment prices or the employees, and they're charging more money in the United States to sell those drugs than in any other country, and profiting extremely from it. And then we get in this situation. This is all based upon the American economy, right? They're not going to make that kind of money if they're not doing business in the United States. And then to say, sorry, because of our business practices, you're cut off from your supply chain when we've been profiting from you. This is absurd. This is something that, how could we get to this point? I don't know what kind of economic politics this would be. It may, I don't even, but the idea that these companies should be forced to have a certain percentage of their employees be American workers, so this would never happen again. You know what I'm saying? It's time to kind of revisit this. This is not free trade. Maybe this is anti-capitalist. I don't know. Maybe it's nationalism. Maybe it's pro-America. I don't know. Maybe I'm shifting on. Maybe Jim will come in and tell me if I've lost my mind on this, or somebody.
You're talking universal health care.
No, I think that what this outlines is that there's a huge business continuity problem worldwide. And I can tell you, in my day job, we're experiencing it left, right, forwards, backwards, in every other direction. And this country, along with the rest of the world, is going to have to take a long, hard look at the global economy and how we support one another in achieving our goals. These supply chain interruptions are going to be very real, and it's going to cause people a great amount of strife, and it could impact people's lives in a really negative way and actually cause deaths in the result of not being able to deliver things like life-saving medicine, food, and all the other necessities that we deal with on a daily basis.
That's my point. Like, there's all the people that may not be subjected to they're not in a more compromised situation to get the virus. Nobody wants this, but I'm saying they're compromised their health, is compromised because they don't have the supply chain. And I'm saying if we were able to somehow create, from this learn and have some kind of policy, laws change requiring for the way we're doing business so this kind of thing wouldn't happen again. I mean, it kind of exposes us to the reality of despite, whatever, production and market is being provided for this, widget, whatever, and that then the citizens become dependent upon it, it shouldn't be a circumstance where this would ever happen again. The business is being made on American citizens, right? I mean, what kind of, somebody jump in and tell me what this type of economic politics I'm talking about. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like there was probably a time where you had a, American made by American, I mean, this is more way people thought, but now it didn't matter, but I'm talking about forcing entities, companies to, if you're going to be doing a certain amount of business in the United States, you have a certain number of employees of your payroll has to be United States jobs. I don't know, how's it going to bring jobs back? And you kill two birds with one stone. You limit the problems of possible supply chains in the future, and you employ a bunch of people, and the companies suck it up because they've been making all this money, and they failed us now as we speak here, expecting them to come through, and where are their profits? They couldn't have enough established for all right. Deb, am I becoming a Republican or is this Democrat? What am I? Rick, someone jump in.
What was that?
You just
Reaganomics
said it
you were
all. I
talking
mean,
about?
that's what I said. Was the UAW with the Buy American campaign in the 70s when they wanted everything made here in the USA, and this was part of it.
Right.
This is what that is, and you're right. It is nationalism, but it's also, I guess, covering your ass.
Rick, what do you think? I see you there with your hat. Have we heard from Rick? Did we figure out his mute button?
Rick is very smiley today.
He's very oh, there he is. All right.
Can't hear you, Rick.
Put your microphone on. Well, he can't hear us then.
Still can't
We cannot
hear
hear
you.
Rick.
We cannot
can't.
hear Rick.
Yeah, but we hear Jim,
I
and he
can't
does
hear
a really
Amanda
cool
either.
echo. It's like
I don't know if
surreal.
I've heard too much out of Amanda. Can't hear you, Amanda.
She doesn't have her mic on.
She's talking, but I know I can't hear
He's
her.
turning his on and off.
Yeah, I'm turning mine on and off. And I mean, but to directly address your question, Michael, the only way to address this in the future is to have companies like China get out in front of the pandemic. And as long as we continue as a global nation or global world, whatever you want to call it, and trying to suppress announcing global threats, this issue will continue.
Jamie went upside down almost.
Jamie's
What was
freaking
that?
out.
Hold on. Jim, keep going. Well, Jim, first of all, I understand what you're saying, the only way to stop that, but let's just say that we're not able to. I think one of the things to think about is, we shouldn't be in a situation where we're not conceptually stockpiling. You know what I mean? And we certainly shouldn't be. I mean, what was the supply? Whenever they shut down the borders and there's no importing of these particular medicines, what was the preparedness for that? Did anyone think about that? You know what I mean? Like now that but at least now that we know that, shouldn't there be a conscious effort to not let it happen again? I understand what you're saying, Jim, in terms of stopping a pandemic from happening. There's a tremendous amount of responsibility of the identifying country to be honest and forthright, report to the World Health Organization so information can be gleaned. But, who's going to say that's ever going to happen? You know what I mean? And this may be as good as the response could ever be, but nevertheless, there's no reason why we couldn't have other measures that have developed from this particular situation in particular that say we're not prepared, and some of the people to look at would be if we were still, theoretically we'd still be sending people to work and producing some medications, or it'd be in the country that have a bunch of stuff that haven't gone out yet. They could have limited people coming in and working. Supply chain may be slow, but at least it's here in the country. We're not at such a loss. I mean, think of it's even days to get it to the docks, to get it to the boat, to get it to the plane. These things are not. It's not like the turnaround's not the same, so we're just even more at a disadvantage. Someone join me on this. Am I missing the?
Have I fixed my microphone problems yet?
Yes,
Yes,
Rick.
we
So
can
good to hear
you.
your voice.
Yes.
Fantastic. So I'll say this: I agree with Jamie, who said nothing so far. So I'm on his page.
That's fair. All right, what about the guns? I think we can all come back to the guns issue in terms of
It's like the Brady Bunch.
the
over there.
you know, like I want to return to another topic that is also like another area where, in light of the policy-making decisions of our executive branch, some of the overlooked people and circumstances that have not been recognized, and I'm speaking about cannabis growers of the 12 plants recreationally who maybe not believe, you know, are currently in a situation they're not, or afraid to have a gun in the house because of their plants, under the pretense that cannabis users and guns do not go hand in hand, or have been, you know, not been able to register a weapon. That's problematic because, in light of the police proclaiming that they're not interested in investigating property crimes, of breaking and entering into someone's house to steal cannabis plants and not having a weapon to defend themselves, could be problematic. Any thoughts from our esteemed panel as we discuss this?
It's a huge
Booby
problem.
traps.
It is, but you can't expect logic from any product of the drug war. It's predicated on an illegal or an illogical concept. So all our drug war law reform efforts have been trying to restore sanity to an insane circumstance. This is just one corner of insanity that has yet to be cleared.
Well, here's another issue. This one may be a little bit easier to, you know, solve, but, you know, today with First Natural Wellness, Roman and Leela, Dr. Schultz over there, and Komorn Law, and the MMA, Michigan Medical Marijuana Association, asked and really demanded from the governor to take action to eliminate the requirement of medical marijuana patients to have in-person doctor evaluations. The history of this is quite saddening and speaks in a lot of ways to the way medical cannabis was dealt with over the years prior, you know, up until the MMFLA and the expansion of into the MRA and the creation of Lara's interest and desire to improve the marijuana program in Michigan. But during a period of time, there was a lot of irrational decisions that were made, one of which was the necessitating of the amending of the MMA, where they further defined the bona fide doctor-patient relationship between a medical marijuana patient and their physician. And what they essentially created was a more specific definition, which specifically was that one of the requirements was the physician reviewed the patient's relevant medical records and completed a full assessment of the patient's medical history, current medical condition, including a relevant, in-person medical evaluation of the patient, thus requiring an in-person evaluation in order for the recommendation of the physician to be signed, right? So at the same time that this is taking place, the same legislatures that had gotten a 2/3 vote to amend the MMA were at the same time passing legislation that was approving telemedicine visits for insurance reimbursements for all other medical procedures, allowing the convenience and interaction between the doctor and the patient to take place through Skype or some kind of telecommunication, and making sure that the law reimbursed those healthcare providers, right? I mean, it's everything that the healthcare system would want, reducing costs, right? You know, across the board. So, as we stand today, this amendment requiring the in-person evaluation still exists and makes no sense for the following reason. 360,000 patients in the state of Michigan. They need to see individuals, they need to see their doctor. The idea that these individuals, this class of individual patients, who could arguably be the sickest. I hear myself in my ears. All right, it's okay. So the fact that these individuals are, you know, potentially the sickest people going into a doctor's office and subjecting the doctor and the staff, where they couldn't do this via telecommunication when there's unequivocally state of emergency for all healthcare professionals to minimize contact with patients as much as they possibly can. Specifically, I mean, hospitals are, adjourning is not the right word, but canceling elective surgeries, limiting the amount of contact with the patients, whatnot. They're all at risk, right? They're all at severe risk. And the idea that the medical cannabis, group of patients have been left out is absurd. And as we asked in this press release, and all the other stakeholders that were interested, that we asked the governor to utilize her awesomeness and her executive authority and lift the ban that requires in-person physician-patient interactions and allows for telemedicine as a method for certifying patients moving forward. And I encourage all those that are listening to, if they have the time to see this press release, maybe we'll post it in the link below or whatever, but it's call the governor at her office. They're 517-373-3400 or 517-335-7858. I think that's her personal, no, I'm kidding. But that's the telephone numbers. And urge her, please, to let physicians provide medical marijuana certifications via telemedicine immediately and not discriminate for patients who are seeking interactions with their doctors and not calling that a bona fide relationship. All right, so let's go to our panel and see what they have to say, if anything. Earl, you got any comments before we're connecting over?
I think there was a shift in perception. I think when it first passed, medical marijuana, they still thought it was devil's lettuce. And at some point in time, they realized that there is some medical benefits, and now they're being more open to it. But unfortunately, we had to go through a lot of BS before they came to this point today to even allow virtual certifications.
They didn't allow. They haven't allowed for it yet. We're asking.
No.
I don't know if she even saw it, but it's. I was going to comment, but let's hear from our panel because I want to hear what they're saying and if they have any comments on this. What do you think the likelihood of this taking place? Rick, I see your mouth moving and your mustache tickling your nose, but I don't see. I don't hear anything.
I don't either.
Jamie, do you want to get in? Come on, I see that hat. That looks good.
I haven't heard Jamie one time, I don't think.
Oh, Eric Gunnels is on. I hate Eric Gunnels.
We got Gunnels.
He looks like he's got a gun somewhere. Seriously,
It probably does.
it's a hunter hat.
Amanda's got a great poster behind her. Amanda for the win.
That's right. When we get her back on the screen, she can maybe show it off. Rick, what do you think about this?
I just have to figure out how this whole Skype thing works, but I do have to say I'm having a whole lot of fun with it. So the social distancing, whatever. I'm feeling totally connected right now.
Well, Amanda, since you are an operator at the elevation station, and one of the services that are provided is physician certifications, would you support, or will you call the governor on her cell phone right now at 517-335-7858 and urge her to lift to remove the requirement of in-person medical evaluations before a physician could certify a patient?
I don't hear her.
For
There we go.
for this to be a safe environment, because at any one clinic time you have several patients all in the same place, and they should be treated the same way that any other doctor visit is treated. And also, as a matter of fact, it'll really help for patients who are somewhat immobile or unable to get down to a certain doctor because their drive is an hour or so. So it's yes, I definitely support that, and I am looking forward to seeing how she responds.
Jamie, with the guitar in your hand, either play its tune or respond. What your thoughts are on this? You just go on mute tonight?
Yeah, I haven't heard Jamie at all.
Because his microphone is not on. You can see
Everybody's used the
over his
Skype for the first
photo.
time tonight,
It's
so.
not on.
Rick, you want to get in on this? You want to speak for Jamie? Just say whatever you want and see if you can figure it out.
Jamie's got
The
a.
governor's taken several moves already to address issues regarding COVID-19. We're talking about through the Marijuana Regulatory Agency, allowing curbside pickup, delivery programs, expedited licensure. So this is reasonable. It's not an undue request. She's already shown some signs of being willing to do this in the past. I think you had a home run with this. Roman and Robin Snyder's participation as well, and your letter, your press release, all of this together should get us our desired result.
You know, and I would say this, Jamie or Deb, Mandy, you guys want to comment? Jamie's still not trying for it, is he?
Eric probably wants to comment on this too, but we've got some technical challenges. But again, Mike, I think it's a really good thing, and it's something that I think most of the operators of any medical marijuana clinic would agree that it's gonna greatly help.
I mean, remember, at some point, when the administrative rules came out with the MMFLA, they were made under an emergency situation. The emergency situation that necessitated those rules, which allowed for supply to be from caregivers directly to dispensaries, amongst other things, or provisioning centers, was so that the state would not go into a state of emergency of patients not be able to get their cannabis. Right? The entire premise of that existed from the, you got to have your applications in by December, that ran all through 2000, end of 17, all of 18 into 2019 when they stopped it. Now they're doing the wind out. That was premised under avoiding a state of emergency that patients would not be able to get their cannabis. I mean, that is the premise that the state took in making these emergency rules. So they've already, by emergency rule, by state emergency, whatever you want to call it, deemed the significance of these group of patients enough to the extent that rules will be made so they can get their cannabis. This has seemed to be a more difficult place to get to than telemedicine, getting the certification. You know what I mean? We're talking about supply of marijuana versus a licensed doctor through Lara and a patient that has, got a disease and interacting with the physician over telemedicine. Like, that is such an easier path to connect up than, finding the source of cannabis that's going to supply that patient's needs, right? It doesn't make any sense at the end of the day when you think about it. And clearly, the governor has recognized this the particular community of patients as significant enough to utilize her administrative, her executive authority to remove the board to try to expedite the licenses, right? That wasn't done. I mean, it's done for businesses, but
Right.
in theory, it was supposed to be done for moving along the licenses, more places to be open, creating the better flow, arguably reducing the prices, trying to compete with the caregiver. Who knows? Whatever it is, it's all based on, it's got to be based upon people, not the business, And I just find it absurd that this is. And at the time that it was done, I talked about this a little earlier, but the time when they amended the law, there's a couple portions of the law that the MMA back then, 2012, 13, that were certainly helpful. They certainly ended the issue of Section 4 and Section 8, if you remember that. But the necessitating of this bona fide relationship being in person, essentially carving out the interaction between doctors and patients for these purposes as unique to all other parts of the practice of medicine is just kind of
Jamie, we can hear you now.
Well, that's kind of, pre-MMFLA,
yeah.
they
Yeah.
really didn't want access to be that simple, even though it should have been easier and more streamlined. Now there's a system in place for the state to capitalize off the MMFLA, and now there's, it's logical. Who's going to argue that you should not
Right.
be able to?
Now, right, of course. But, the other point was, even back then, the argument against requiring this was that there are physicians willing to travel every month to a certain location where they can see their patients, on a regular basis. And if you don't have that, then they're not going to have that access to it. They're not going to be able to drive. Some of these places are not an abundance of physicians locally, right? So it really limits the access to better care. Like if the patients from their place could interact with the doctor via Skype on a more regular basis, the act of having 3 or 4 Skype calls for 3 minutes for whatever they would normally charge versus the drive down for the one visit could easily be supplemented.
Sure.
You know what I mean? They're fungible. They could be exchanged with one another for purposes of, the way it's being done now with the in-person and creating more interaction over greater period. If that was something that they really desired, in a way, it could be said it was just trying to make it more difficult for patients to get their card, right? Tommy's playing Jim over there. He's throwing the wrap-up thing at me, and that means we got to take a quick break. Can we come back? Can we talk about this still? Listen, if you guys on the Skype there are not getting your time in, it's because I don't hear you functioning well with your mute button. But let's try to.
We're functioning just fine.
We're functioning
Like
fine.
everybody's online now.
All right, good. When we come
I'm
back, you
kinda
guys will do.
liking it.
I say this every. But when we come back, you guys will do most of the talking. I'm kidding. I mean, maybe we'll try.
I like
We'll
the
try
fact
it.
that
Mike,
I get
before
to
you
talk now.
break, how about giving some credit to Michael Toohey and his watch party?
Yes, Michael Toohey. Is he? I'm not paying attention to that. Is he? Thank you, Michael Toohey, and all that you do, my friend. Hope you're doing well out there and being safe, and certainly taking care of that ankle, and all the hemp seeds for this upcoming year.
And when we come back, we've got Eric Gunnels on the line now. I think we need to revisit the firearms issue.
Guns with
He has
Gunnels.
a couple things to say on that.
We're going
All
to
right.
call that section Guns with Gunnels.
wait.
A big shout out to my friend and trench buddy, Peter O'Toole. I see has joined us as well. Peter, my best to you and your family. All right, we're going to take a quick break and come back. You guys stay and don't move off the Skype here. We have you. And we seem to be working the audio better.
Yeah, don't move.
All right, we'll be right back.
The Planet Green Trees Show.
Join the Michigan Medical Marijuana Association today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org. The MMMA is focused on the well-being and safety of medical marijuana patients. The MMMA site provides the most comprehensive and up-to-date news on legal issues, politics, research, cultivation, as well as the various strange products and methods of cannabis use. Come join the discussion with the most knowledgeable and passionate advocates in Michigan today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org.
Well, yeah, I see that, but it's asking me to.
Whoops! Did state lawmakers accidentally legalize marijuana in Ohio? Some top law enforcement officers say yes.
Type that in.
Columbus City Attorney says the decision is based on complications after the state legalized hemp. On July 30th, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine signed Senate Bill 57 into law. It legalizes hemp in Ohio and changes the definition of marijuana to exclude hemp based on the amount of THC. Now we have to be able to distinguish the difference between hemp and marijuana, said Vice President of the Ohio Fraternal Order of Police. That is not possible for a human being to do. That has to be done through crime analysis. The executive director of the Ohio Prosecuting Attorneys Association agrees. This bill de facto legalizes marijuana in Ohio, at least for the time being, said Louis Tobin. We raised this concern with legislators during debate of the bill. It's disappointing those concerns were rejected.
Sessions up at the corner today.
Oops. Anybody want to go to Cedar Point?
We're on break, huh? Okay.
I'm always on break.
Yeah. Woo!
I'm surprised Eric isn't smoking right now. I know he's always on break too.
Why can't I see myself? Jim, you got me blocked off.
No, I can't block the video. I can't do that.
Come on now. My screen's black. Why?
I have no idea. Did you
Can you guys see me?
It ain't fair, John Sinclair, in the stir for breathing air.
That's why you guys
It ain't
can't see
fair,
me, huh?
John Sinclair, in the stir for breathing air. Set him free, let him be, breathing air like you and me. What's the judge to do? What else can Judge Columba do? We got to set him free. This whole place went nuts.
I miss
If
Jeff
he
Frazier.
was a soldier man, shooting gooks in Vietnam. If he was CIA, selling dope and making hay, he'd be free, breathing air like you and me. What's a judge do? What else could Judge Columbo do? Well, we got to set him free. And sure enough, that was Saturday, and that next Monday, John Sinclair walked out of jail. And the Supreme Court issued an opinion in People versus John Sinclair that said, it's cruel, it's unusual, it's arbitrary, it's irrational, it's capricious, and it cannot be the law in the state of Michigan that we treat marijuana the same way we treat opioids. And they set him free.
These events inspired the creation of Ann Arbor's annual pro-legalization Hash Bash Rally, which can and it's going to be held this April in Ann Arbor, and I have been asked to be one of the main speakers at the event. Again,
John Sinclair was and is a poet provocateur, and adamant opponent and protester against America's involvement in the Vietnam War and all the bombings. He was organized together with Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin and the Black Panthers guys. And, he organized against the war. And in his words, we were protesting the war and we were advocating for the legalization of marijuana, all the while smoking vast quantities of it. We ought to do something about finally getting this plant off of the controlled substances list. We have law where the state of Michigan is licensing the medical use of marijuana. At the same time, it says under the Board of Pharmacy says under the Controlled Substances Act that it is still a controlled substance. And not only is it still a controlled substance, it's still a Schedule I controlled substance. And being Schedule I controlled substance means that it is contraband per se, and that its mere presence is evidence of a crime, and it justifies the raids. Michigan State Police spend 40% of their resources going after marijuana that is allowed for medical use, is licensed by the state, is now been voted into law by the people of this state to be legal for adult use. And yet it's still 40% of the police budget, it's still 40% of the prosecutor's daily load, it's still 40% of the Michigan State Police Crime Lab daily load. And it's still Schedule I, which justifies the stops, the searches, the seizures, and more importantly, the raids. And that means men with AR-15s and ski masks going in where men, women, and children and dogs and grandparents, are quietly sitting there watching TV. And because the neighbor complained of the smell of marijuana coming from a basement window, these patients or caregivers and now any citizen in the state is allowed to grow. The continued placement of marijuana on the Michigan State list of controlled substances is just simply absurd.
This lawsuit arose from, it has a lot of history. And a few months ago, we were talking about how absurd it is that Michigan both has marijuana as a Schedule I controlled substance, which theoretically has no medical use, and also we're licensing facilities to sell marijuana as medicine. And we all believe that those two cannot stand together, that they are incompatible. And so here we are today.
It's got a medical legal identity with huge bureaucracies of the state supervising and charging a minimum of $66,000 for you to open a dispensary to sell this weed that last year you could have been arrested and sent to prison for by the same people. You know, this whole thing is just totally horseshit, if I could use that.
That's a technical term.
It's hard to even fathom. And you know, for 80 years they've been locking people up and taking their possessions and harassing and terrorizing us as citizens because we like to smoke weed. So I'm proud to be part of this effort. I want to be part of every effort to completely remove the police from our lives as regarding to marijuana.
All right.
They got nothing at all to do with marijuana.
Well, in 2018, when the administrative rules were supposed to be implemented to provide a mechanism for people applying to get licenses, the state at the same time acknowledged the principle that Michigan, to avoid a state of emergency so patients couldn't get their marijuana, needed to formulate emergency rules. So, first of all, when the legislature passed this law, they acknowledged that the state would be in an emergency if people didn't get marijuana. That is not how you talk about a controlled substance. Secondly, the way that they dealt with it was that they allowed caregivers, who they vilified for the last however many years, to supply these places where patients would get cannabis. This is not a controlled substance. This is not how controlled substances are provided for patients. And as the year went on, and they tried to move to their regulated system that's been created, which wasn't working, they had more caregivers, extended the roles, and identified the names of caregivers this last go around that this method of people growing in their basement are going to provide, or wherever are going to provide to be the source for patients. And that's the state of affairs right now in Michigan. This is not a controlled substance.
Hi, I'm Steve Miller. I'm retired sergeant with the Canton Police Department. Had just under 25 years of police work. On behalf of John Sinclair, our law firm, Komorn Law, along with Matt Abel and his law firm at Cannabis Council, are suing the State of Michigan Pharmacy Board to have marijuana removed off the controlled substances schedule. So today I'm here to tell a story. We're going to call it the 7 degrees of separation between Steve Miller and John Sinclair, and linked through one fairly famous politician, Mr. Perry Bullard. 20 plus years ago, when I was a young detective, I investigated a case in which Mr. Bullard suffered a tragic death. He was a great politician to have. I had to investigate that death. Mr. Bullard wrote a Supreme Court opinion that got Mr. John Sinclair out of prison for the 2 joints at that time. Also during this time, when I was a young detective and investigating Mr. Bullard's death, I had the opportunity of meeting one Michael Komorn. We had a case in common, and over the course of that case, he was the defense attorney. We actually did what most think is impossible, and he and I became good friends over the course of that case, and I developed a lot of respect for him at that time. Michael Komorn in and around that same time bringing me to the future where Mr. Sinclair and Mr. Bullard are connected through a Supreme Court opinion written by Mr. Bullard and setting Mr. Sinclair free. Fast forward to now, we have a pretty significant lawsuit against the State of Michigan Pharmacy Board right now. This would be a major thing. If we prevail in this lawsuit and marijuana is removed off the controlled substances schedule, then that will be a major, major thing, and I will feel like I've been a major part of history. Michael Komorn, and through his law firm, has really made significant impacts against the war on drugs, especially as it relates to marijuana, and fighting for what's right in this case and for medical marijuana patients and caregivers all over the state. He is a pioneer in the legal world in marijuana law, and he needs to be commended for all the good work he's done in this area to try and get things right.
Hopefully we'll get our hearing. If not, then we'll fight it out in the Court of Appeals and ultimately back to the Supreme Court that originally spoke in the case of John Sinclair back in 1971. It's time for, this absurdity that has forever lived at the heart of the drug war to be done with. And the way to do that is to take marijuana off the controlled substances list altogether. It's no longer to be policed. It's to be regulated.
Bill Schuette led the charge against medical marijuana, and even after the will of the voters was decided and the support was enormous, he still continued to fight against the will of the voters, keeping patients from the medicine that they need. So I think it's important that we all speak up on what we think about this initiative. But when the voters have their say, their will must stand.
Here's Michael Komorn with more Planet Green Trees.
They did like a
Righty. We are back. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, the girls are laughing.
They had a private session?
It's not good.
All right. Welcome, everybody who's still there on the Facebook and whatnot. Please provide comments for us. We'll try to answer whatever questions. We have our people here now from the... They got their own show going on. It appears in the background. They're not paying attention. But let's call upon them if we can.
We do, actually, Michael.
I know. I'm used to it. It's fine.
We're having
I mean,
a great old time over here.
if I got to yell quiet on the set, then we know that nobody's really listening. But why don't you tell us why you guys are having so much fun and we're not, as we sit here by ourselves?
We're sorry about that. We had a great time during break. We were refreshed and ready to go for the next segment. We had a question. It's kind of like a topic about if there have been any updates on the caregiver phase out. But it appears as if that was the question.
I don't know of any. I guess it's a good question to ask because I don't know if this is a time that, in the all the things that are taking place in the world right now, impact that decision. I mean, there could be. What would be the arguments that the phase-out program won't work now because of the pandemic, or what's the reason that the phase-out should happen or will happen sooner because of the pandemic? What do we think? Deb, why is that funny?
Sorry, Michael.
Hello.
Okay, well, there was a clarification. It was about the industry eliminating caregivers and wondering if the coronavirus is going to steer people back to small group models.
Ooh. Depends how long it lasts.
Maybe.
Did you hear the question, Deb? I want to hear what you think. And Jamie and Rick, you guys get in. Come on. Stop pretending that you're participating. Just kidding.
Jamie, we have an interview. Jerry.
Jamie's still muted.
Jamie.
I'm not muted right now.
Jamie's falling asleep over there.
Well, the caregivers can sell flower to processors or cultivators until October 1st. That has not changed as of right now. And I don't think that the coronavirus is necessarily going to drive masses of people to seek the alternative ways. The stores are really busy right now. And,
I've heard the same about the stores.
Well, my question is it going to impact
the people are trying to change course?
Do you think it's going to?
Business Daily has reported on a national trend that as we approach COVID-19 isolation, recreational and medical marijuana cannabis sales are increasing. That's the same hoarding type of mentality that we've seen with the toilet paper.
Good point. But I wonder, does this impact? Does it impact the phase out of
caregiving? To encourage the governor to view cannabis as an essential business to stay open.
Yes, of course, for the purpose of the patients. But do you think the coronavirus 19 is impacting the phase out decision? I'm asking for a bigger answer.
You know, I don't think it is going to affect the phase-out decision. I think that's already written in stone. Unless there was a caregiver group that got together and petitioned the governor to make a change to that, I think it's unlikely that anybody's going to do that without that kind of impetus.
Okay. Well, if the state deems the supply good enough through the licensed commercial system, they'll keep the deadline at October 1st. I think they've demonstrated in the past that if they don't think there's enough to go around, they'll extend it a little bit so to keep the supply up. But there's no change in anything at this moment, or likely to be, I don't think.
Okay, thanks.
You know, we have Eric Gunnels, the consummate gun proponent. Not that anyone's anti-gun, but I do want to point out Shelley Smith commented in here, I'm hoping there will be a scale back of bureaucracy in general. If people can cut through the red tape during a crisis, then it means it can be done. That it means let's cut them for good. And this is echoing a point earlier that I was trying to make, which is that when we're in this circumstance and we have to really examine what's important, you know, I'm looking at it from a lawyer's perspective, the essential proceedings that have to take place. All of those non-essentials mean that they're really not that important. We should really question whether or not they need to be part of the system at all. Like if it can kick them out so long that we're not concerned with the public safety, then maybe it's not a crime. If the person, you know what I mean, maybe they're not worthy of a conviction. You know, maybe it doesn't rise to that level. It kind of coincides with the reports of the commissions that have been studying this, which is that there's too many people being arrested for things that are ridiculous, be tied up in the system. I mean, the idea that, here's another one that was looked over. I know if anyone asked, but how about the number of people that are on probation for marijuana crimes in the state of Michigan? If there ever was a time, I know the governor suspended drug testing, but the money that they need to use and are paid at probation right now, which is usually somewhere between, $800 to $1,500, it's the exact amount of money that's going out of their pocket that the government wants to, put back in. Why not keep, it's like one less thing that they got to get back. It's something like I used the word fungible before. They don't need the $1,000 if they can get it back from the court for their stupid marijuana court cost that's feeding the system. I mean, I'll tell you, this is the thing that's interesting. I was making the point of the pharmaceutical companies being exposed as just tragic for what they've done to the United States, making this money, not having a supply chain for people that need their medicine that would not otherwise be affected by the virus. Well, the fact that our government that is using the executive order at will has not taken steps to exonerate cannabis convictions, remove people from probation from cannabis convictions, empty the jails for people that are in prison for cannabis convictions, and they may be subject to these viruses. And I don't know what that population is, but it does exist. But even backing it up a little, tying these individuals up in the court system, being tied to this, in this time that's still a thing in their life, is absurd under these circumstances. I mean, could we not say, like, when we really look at things now, that somebody would be on probation for a marijuana crime in 2020 when it's been legal for 2 years, or coming up on 2 years, year and a half, is really ridiculous. And the promises of our legislature to take steps to do that and not saying they can't do it, they haven't been able to, when executive orders are flying around like candy handed out at a Halloween, it makes all of this seem like really bad decisions and bad policies. And at this point here that we've got to scale back the bureaucracy in general, yes, it exposes how ridiculous our systems are, our institutions, but it also exposes some of the outrageous policies and failures of our government to act when they should have and promised those too. Jamie, any thoughts on that?
Hey guys, first question, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Oh,
Yeah, I can hear you.
Is it Eric
Good.
Gunnels? Okay, it's not Jamie though. All right,
Yeah,
go ahead.
you can. I can hear
Awesome.
you.
I was testing out the mic.
Do you want to talk?
Wow, sure. I mean,
Don't just talk just to talk. 'Cause I had posed a question about the outrageousness that there hasn't been a action by our government to end the people that are on probation, expunge convictions for marijuana crimes. I mean, I wonder what the number of people are in the state of Michigan that are on probation still for marijuana crimes. It exists. I mean,
Oh, they are. They're out
they
there.
exist, and
Of course it does.
they should be released. So,
yeah.
Who-
I've often wondered if the legalization would stop the drug war from continuing. I've often wondered if the system was just law enforcement and like are just going to continue to do this, regardless of the fact laws change. And I think we're seeing that right now. As part of this does not want to change. It's a money faucet that was pouring into the criminal justice system that they don't want to see go away. And it begs the question, you know.
The snow is melting and is revealing the shit that's already there.
yeah. What about those that expected our? Did anyone in the crew here, our normal team of individuals who worked so diligently to make sure that we had solid representation along with the passage of the Proposition 1 of 2018? Can anyone agree or disagree that the failure to overcome this hurdle right now exposes a major flaw in thinking, in leadership? Especially,
Tell me a state that's overcome that, and then we'll talk.
Say
Tell me a
what?
state that's adequately overcome that, and then you can have a standard.
What are you saying?
Nobody does.
Rick, say it again. I didn't fully understand you.
There's no state where they meet the standard of excellence you're in the Michigan law.
Well, okay,
There's no
but-
state where the police automatically stop prosecuting everything.
No, that's fine, but I'm saying this.
Expectations that's expressed is kind of unrealistic.
Some things, yes, if the expectations of me is for perfection, I'm going to be disappointed all the time. But let's examine what I'm actually asking and what the realities of it are. The Illinois governor expunged, 20,000, 50,000 marijuana convictions. I think that the intention of our legislatures that we're speaking of here made statements that they believe that this should take place. The expungements. There was some legislation that was introduced somewhere, and comments that were made about why they supported it, why they didn't support it, what the problems were, testimony. Nothing's happened. And what I'm suggesting is, I'm not asking for perfection, but clearly, of the things that could have, would have, should have been on the agenda, this was an easy no-brainer. And as we see how powerful and with, almost at will, the exercise of the executive orders can take place, this could have been wiped out in that way. That's how the others have done it. The idea that we're wasting resources of citizens that should be going towards their family to put food on the table, and they're dumping it into the court system for probation for a crime that's no longer legal. If that's absurd, then and it creates a public health risk because these people can't feed themselves and they're punished for crimes, then they should take an executive order. I mean, if you can.
But you're still fighting these cases.
I'm still fighting these cases.
You're still fighting. You're at district court level in some of these cases still. Just fighting them still.
They refuse to say that they're wrong.
And I'm not even asking about mine in particular. I'm saying there's probably I don't know what the numbers are. I wonder if it exists, but there's thousands of people I'm going to imagine that are still on probation for marijuana cases.
I would still be on probation if it wasn't for the fact I passed the statute of limitations of probation.
That's true. They were not right. Exactly. Right. They could no longer, right.
That's crazy.
There's no more punishment that they can tie into this. But to me, it's patently bizarre that the circumstances exist here that any human's resources in the state of Michigan should be for, paying off or, owing anything to the state for cannabis-related alleged, crimes or convictions at this point. And I'm suggesting that it could have, would have, should have been done. And I'm saying that the promises and expectations that were made are magnified at a higher level in this environment that we're in right now. And, however long it lasted for before they stopped the drug testing, still exposed people that were getting, waking up in the morning and calling in, getting their color and number and going down and dropping and being around all of that. For how long was that taking place for before they decided to disband that? And of that group of people, substantial amount of them were probably for marijuana, in talk of misdemeanor district courts and whatnot. That was unnecessary. And it wouldn't have been exposure of all those people had they not been, had they been exonerated or removed them from probation. That's all I'm talking about. But, at the end of the day, well, what do we know from all this? Why is this existing? Because the commission themselves on court funding declared that the court systems are broken. You're trying to take away the food that these animals are, dying, going extinct animals that, scrapping around for food before they, too big to fail kind of stuff that, and this is still going on. And unfortunately, the cannabis community that suffered for all these years is still being beaten on and eaten on. That's the thing.
Right.
I appreciate you continually talking about this.
There's social justice issues.
Yeah, and it's not like you just say it once and just move on from it. Like it's a consistent topic almost on every show, and I really appreciate you because that's really what it comes down to. It's almost as if it's like the purpose of us legalizing and the purpose of us trying to dismantle this whole system it gets lost. It now gets talked about money. It's like, no, it was the purpose was not to see how we can capitalize off this plan. It was about stop arresting people,
right?
Stop forfeiting their stuff, right. Stop breaking up lives,
right?
Over a lie. And I mean, Thompson said it earlier. It's built on a lie. So everything else after that is just a bunch of crap.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I appreciate that, Komorn. I really do.
That's the biggest thing I see.
I appreciate you appreciating it because sometimes I feel like I'm talking about stuff it's absurd. Like who wants to hear? Like there's so many other things.
Who's going to believe it?
Yeah, right.
It's like we're talking about the gospel, and then all of a sudden, it just scales far from the eyes, and then people can see.
I like that story. We used that metaphor in another case, if you remember. Good old Judge McMillan. Anyways, let's hear from our panel on Skype. What do you guys got to say? They're still there? They started their own podcast, I think, when we weren't looking.
You guys hear me?
There's Rick.
Rick looks like he's in a deep inhale.
We can't make hardly heads or tails of the system because it's
Jamie.
It makes money on it. It makes money on the perpetuation.
Deb, what do you say? You've been quiet. I don't like that. I'd like to hear from you.
Is everybody feeling okay?
I mean, if you don't say anything, I'm going to start talking badly about the Rolling Stones. So pipe in, please. Just kidding.
We're going to bring up Prince.
But that's the truth of it. I mean, it's a sad reflection of it.
Eric got in there, okay.
Yeah, this is what a system looks like when it unwillingly is forced to give up something it doesn't want to give up. It does it so it's not conform, it's not willing. It happens not all it happens in layers and waves. That means justice is delayed for people who deserved it right front.
Absolutely.
Justice delayed is justice denied, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure.
How about the other thing, my dear friend Daryl Barry, our consummate conservative, wanted me to bring to everyone's attention. Think about people who have property that's tied up in forfeiture under the old forfeiture laws. Think about those kind of situations. Like the need to get to your bank account right now instead of a government issuance check for $1,000. Like, let's be real. Let's think about what our focus is on. The government's going to be taking that anyways. And many of these cases are all premised on and the legal theories behind it or prior to the United States Constitution, a United States Supreme Court finding that 90% of the practices of forfeiture violated the Eighth Amendment, excessive fines, and cruel and unusual punishment. And since that opinion came out, there are cases that are pending forfeiture that every single day that goes by is another day where the government is violating their civil rights, their constitutional rights, their Eighth Amendment. And if there ever was a time to return those proceeds right now, you would think it is right now, when citizens in the state of Michigan shouldn't be, if they can, they should not have to rely on the government to get money. If they have it themselves, they should certainly be able to use their own that they've saved up and has been seized by the government at this point. But this exists too in Michigan. Again, a topic that, who would think this? But it's a reality.
It is.
All right, Daryl, do I get my, did I do my job right there, Daryl? Daryl wants me to complain about our governing administrators and policymakers. I've done a good job at that tonight, Daryl. But back to the panel. And Eric, I know we can hear you. You got a hat that would suggest to me that you are a hunter and are good with guns. We were talking earlier about guns and the medical cannabis community, cannabis community in general.
Yeah, remember
and
I told
how
you, Mike,
awful it would be
when,
for a
when you're ready to purchase one, you
recreational
take,
adult
Steve
going to
Miller
plants
and
to
me
be
with you to the
concerned
gun
about not
shop
being able to
and we'll help you
defend
pick
their
one out.
home when, if for example, a break and entering should take place to try to steal marijuana plants in this environment that we're in, where police have announced that they are not going to be making calls for property crimes. What say you, Eric Gunnels?
Well, I I would actually like to see the NRA step in and honor what the Trump administration, the Obama administration has said, which is this is a states' rights issue. If the states has the right to issue medical marijuana cards and licenses, or if it's legal recreationally, then that does not mean that your Second Amendment disappeared. So I think the NRA should step in and speak up for people that use cannabis, especially since now many of the states are going legal.
How do you get the NRA's ear on that issue? That's the key.
That's a good question, Steve. That's a good question. I'd love to figure out a way. I'd like to be if Bernie Sanders wins the presidency, I'll go to work for Bernie Sanders. I'll try to be a liaison between the NRA and his administration. Somebody else got a better plan?
No, it's a good plan.
Yeah.
No, but I think, I just think that the NRA should be speaking up, and they should be on the side of cannabis and states' rights.
Absolutely.
What's considered a weapon that you can have? Like a taser?
Hey,
Is that considered?
You can always get a sword.
Huh?
Sword.
My clinging God.
Yeah, Eric and his sword over there, brandishing weapons behind there with his hunter hat.
Straight up gladiator.
What are you compensating for, Eric?
I think everybody should have a taser.
It's like any other tool. I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
What, a taser? Do you got a taser?
This sword.
No.
Not to be confused with Amanda Jocelyn. There's a jostling pole that one might have if you're riding a horse at someone else. That'd be a good thing to have right now. You know, I'm talking for jostling.
Jousting.
Jousting. Okay, but not to be confused with Amanda, of course. Just kidding. I was trying to
Exactly.
But those would be legal. Sword or some kind of ninja.
Lucky for everybody, there's only one of me.
Stars, ninja stars.
Ninja stars. We got nunchucks.
King
Whips
Corso
and
dogs.
chains.
King Corso.
Whoa, what's going on over there, Deb? The whips and chains.
Nothing. I'm just offering up some weaponry,
I do have to say for the
Deb, she's got the Kindle Unlimited over there, and she found the book with whips and chains.
The audio version?
Possibly. Keep your hands free.
In our industry, it's like 50 Shades Green.
Ooh.
All right. Well,
hold on. I want to say so. There's a couple. We're wrapping up the show soon, but there's from my perspective, I'd say that there's it's a great. It's been kind of a weird time. I think we could all admit that it's since no one has really lived through this before in our lifetime, and I could say that it's a little scary when panic sets in and you find that your neighbors are hoarders and going to kill you over some toilet paper. Tells you that things are, and it's interesting because we all get news in different ways, and we believe certain things, and the information is so, so much disparity in the underlying, messaging. Like it's a hoax, it's not a hoax. Panic sets in, and people are going crazy about, it's all over the board and whatnot. And but of course, there are people that are keeping their head and trying to find some sense of humor in it. Not that it should be funny, but just to kind of keep, laugh to keep from crying. And there's a lot of different social media things that have been floating around, and there's this whole, so I'm a parent. I got 3 young kids, and they have shut down all the schools. So all the parents are, experiencing a whole new thing, which is that they're homeschooling now. So there's all these memes going around, which have been really creative and funny about what's going on about the homeschooling. And some of my favorites, there's one that came out that was this. Homeschooling's going real well. 2 students suspended for fighting and 1 teacher fired for drinking on the job. Right? There's some good stuff going on. You see me talking to myself this week. Mind your own business. I'm having a parent-teacher conference. Stuff like that. Those are good.
Is that what went on at your house
God
today,
bless.
That's a
those
good thing.
parents who are home with their kids, trying to teach them and keep them healthy and safe. God bless them.
Okay. Any comments on it? Any have any thoughts on this period of time? Make some suggestions to parents that need to teach at home. Anybody?
Cannabis, just
Children.
a lot of cannabis, and it'll get you through.
For the parents,
I
yeah,
don't
of
know
course,
kids
right.
at home.
Rosetta Stone.
I think it's a fun time over at the Powers house, though.
That's a good idea. Learn a new language over the
that's false.
time.
I'm sure there's 1,000 apps now, right? I don't have any
Yeah,
kids.
there is.
I'm sure there's probably.
Babbel's one.
I went to
good
the
one.
thing. So the kids have. So one of my kids is in 5th grade, and they have these Chromebook books that they work on at school. So the set out an announcement that you can come pick up your kid's Chromebook at the
you
school.
had to go wait in line.
So I showed up. So it's like, they give a limited period of time. Please, don't bring your kids, and social distancing. Park over here, or this and that. So I show up. It looked like an apocalyptic ending. Like people just standing around looking at their phones with their kids, all parking in the wrong spot, violating all kinds of social rules, standing in line, waiting to get. I made Jamie stand in line with me. I was livid.
Oh, did he go stand?
No, no, he didn't go with me. I was on the phone with him. And I was like, "This is crazy." I was just, and I see other parents coming out.
Is it possible for school to continue?
Sequestered in his compound,
like online, like college, like a college course that you would take.
Michael waiting in a line. Imagine that, Jim.
Virtual school.
I tell you in line all the time.
I've never waited
school motto?
in line. Ever.
New school motto?
With Michael.
No. Jim just leaves. He's like, "Fuck it, I'm out of here."
That's what I wanted to do, but I had to get the, who knew it was like it was like a walking, dead scene where if I felt like if I didn't get there, I felt like I was experienced.
He blasted out of this office quickly.
But I'm telling you, it was so institutionalized. There was 2:00 in the afternoon at a high school building, standing in line with a bunch of other parents trying to get, something that I'm afraid they're going to run out on. They got one person behind there taking them in. I felt like I was in some communist country. You know what I mean? It was like, way to get my bread off the shelf. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah. That's where we're at right now. It's crazy. Now they're going to start writing us checks, and it's crazy.
Well, everyone here at Planet Green Trees is keeping their head, right? Everyone's, and so with most of the guests. Who's lost their head the most? Jim? No.
I don't know.
Jamie? No.
What was the question?
Who's lost their head the most from the
There we
Planet
go.
Green Trees crew in this crisis
their
on
head.
Infinite Earths?
Their head.
Oh, not me. I'm calm as a cucumber.
Jim's totally calm.
Deb knows a lawyer that lost what would be called their inner calm.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
What
tell
a
us about that.
narcissistic bitch.
Okay. We don't have to expose the.
Do I feel a role play coming on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Except
All
I
right.
didn't even
Do
screenshot
tell.
it.
Has anybody heard from Schuyler?
Wait.
Speaking of
Deb,
attorneys.
Deb, go ahead, Deb. I want to hear you talk badly about another lawyer, please.
What's going on, Deb?
Is that advice from my lawyer? Don't do that.
No,
No, he wants you to tell it.
Well, yeah.
Oh, he wants me to tell it. I know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to hear it.
This prominent female lawyer goes on Facebook today.
Oh, we lost
and she's
her.
complaining about how her daughter is missing out on all the fun shit in her senior year, and that we senior citizens don't give a fuck. We're out and infecting everybody. And there was some woman in the supermarket who was an old lady who had 3 bottles of vodka in her cart. And how dare she have 3 fucking bottles of vodka in her cart while her daughter can't go to some fucking party. And she said that the seniors out here spreading all this shit around. So I just went on and said, everybody I know over 60 is at home. We're at home. We're not out spreading shit around. And she went off on me. She blamed, she went, okay, boomer, that kind of shit, but really intense. So I just blocked her. I'll let Michael name her. I don't want to be held up for any kind of lawsuit. So you can say who she was, Michael.
Hashtag block 'em.
What I did.
Good for you.
What the hell? Your daughter can't go to some party and people are dying. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Who is it?
DP are the initials.
Oh, ouch.
Oh, Conticella.
Ouch.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, the point is, I mean, whether it would be an example as we were looking for.
Of some kind of a bitch, and then I just blocked her.
No, since someone that's lost it a little bit, that's acting irrational under the circumstances.
Insane. Because of the senior year,
people
and
on
she
the beach
got
in
him
Florida,
up.
and they're not old people; they're young people.
Well, think about this. So Steve has Earl. Steve's kid is in junior at in
Howell High School.
Howell High School. Semifinals.
Final four of the hockey championship.
Canceled. Over. Okay? I mean, when are they going to play next? When I get the team together, get them back out there. Dan's
The
kid
championship?
The semifinals was canceled. It was supposed to be played at
USA Hockey Arena, the old CompuWare Arena.
Right, so they're going to play there. It's the finals weekend, so the final four.
It was supposed to be last Friday.
Yeah, they canceled it. So that's that. Now, going into the spring season, what are kids doing now that is the basketball season over? It should be.
Basketball,
same thing. Would have been over same time of year.
Yeah.
So you're getting into the gym for baseball season. That's not happening. Think about all the kids that waiting for their senior year to get their play in and get drafted, go to college, or all that kind of activity or whatever. Or these kids that want to senior trips, right? Their last days before they go up to.
Yeah, I get it, Michael, but still, I mean.
No. I'm not defending her. I'm not defending her.
That's life. What the fuck is
I got it.
Well, would I overstep about to say? What about the people say you did have that tournament and then something was to happen?
Breaking news.
Breaking news?
We had a big breakout there.
Or what if there was a school
Hold on,
shooting?
there's a breaking news apparently.
What's the breaking news?
I've just been informed that the California State Department, or Department of State, some department, California has issued a statewide stay-home order.
Statewide?
State.
Wow.
Stay home like you can't leave your house at all? Please be more specific.
It's
Go home, Michael. Go home and sequester yourself.
Deb, I would. Deb.
Grove Street and Medicine, which is like San Francisco, but now statewide.
Yeah, I read that about San Francisco. That's coming to a town near us, I'm afraid.
Just like Italy.
Yeah.
Deb, don't misunderstand what I was saying.
I gotta go back to the store tomorrow, you guys. I gotta stock up on some more goodies if I can find any.
It's probably going to be here.
You know what, man? I called Myers and they delivered shit to me last night.
I think so.
Well, I tried that and they 2 days in advance, and then they canceled it at the last minute. I was livid. And then they said, well, you can reorder, but you're going to have to wait another 2 days. And by that time, I'd be starving. So.
See, I ordered it like 4 o'clock in the afternoon for an 8 o'clock delivery. They showed up at 11:30 at night with the stuff on my front porch. But it was cool, and they had everything.
Yeah, the first 2 times I did it was excellent. But this time, they're just really getting slammed.
I'm sure. I'm sitting
Anyway,
over here though.
I'm
I
gonna
told Jamie I got like 5 big bags of dog food. If anybody doesn't have dog food, I got some over here.
good.
So let me
You know,
know.
I might need to borrow the sword over there because I'm gonna
The
have to
sword.
go into the store tomorrow.
Just make
Deb,
Rick go with you. He'll be like a samurai out in front of your cart, you know.
Deb, I wanted to just explain myself for a second because I
Put
felt
on
like
my-
you thought that I was defending that position. I was drawing the attention to how awful it would be for any senior or Steve's kid as a junior to not have that experience. I was not casting blame. The point is that we're all suffering from this, and there's a lot of different, we're all affected
Yeah,
in
people
various
had to
ways.
cancel weddings. I have a friend whose father died, and they could not do a funeral. So, you know,
Right, there's thousands of
what's
levels.
going on?
And I just said that the only way we're going to get through this is if we collectively work together. I mean, the idea that we're pointing fingers, and it's the panic and insanity that causes all the concerns. It's only the neighbor that's going to collectively think only about. I mean, this is how it is at the end of the day. It's not time to panic yet, but that kind of statement is so self-centered and lacking in self-awareness to blame somebody else. Just like.
Or as if life was just supposed to be this road.
Yeah, it was just so everybody.
I mean, it's not the elderly that are causing problems. I mean, it's not
sunshine and rainbows.
Themselves.
It's yeah.
Right.
Can be a very mean and nasty place.
It's not a yellow brick road.
Mean and
I'm
nasty
looking at
places.
All right.
My battery's dead here.
So
My
what
battery's dying.
Do we figure anything out today?
That's gonna be a bad thing.
Well, I guess we'll have to continue on next week with the Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 3.
That's right.
We'll
All right,
be
any final thoughts from anybody? Deb, please go first.
I don't know. Just everybody, see what's best for themselves and best for their families, and do what you have to do. And meanwhile, we'll just keep moving on.
Moving on.
Moving on. That's it. And I'm hoarding cannabis over here, so if anybody's in need, let me know. Because I can do a drive-by and just kind of throw something on your porch and keep going.
Is that the procedure? Is that the new procedure in place?
That's the procedure. That's how we've been handling this crisis.
Delivering
weekend.
newspapers.
That's how we've been handling it.
Just throw it out.
Yeah.
Toss it out.
Okay.
May this bring out kindness. May this bring out compassion. In the words of Shakespeare, there's nothing either good or bad as thinking that makes it so. So.
Very stoic.
Oh, that was really profound.
Very well
That's a very
put.
stoic kind of response, Earl.
Yeah, very
Absolutely.
profound. After
The
we're all
eyes-
being
the
silly,
beau-
and then Earl comes on all profound and shit.
Yeah.
Well, let me follow Earl up with this one. When a person shows themselves to you, you're wise to pay attention the first time. It's not an exact quote from Maya Angelou, but it gets the point across. During a time of crisis, people will show you their true self. Those that continue to help others, even though they're disadvantaged themselves, that'll be apparent. And those that respect others, hoard, and are unsympathetic to the suffering, that will also be apparent too. So this is a character moment for the United States. It's a character moment for all of us as Americans.
Wow, that's
Well
even
said.
more profound. Yeah. Was it Maya Angelou adjacent? Good stuff.
Absolutely.
Well,
Jamie's smiling. Say something.
so it was probably going to be one of the last gatherings for a bit, but we successfully had the Darren McCarty event up north, and it went really well, and everybody had a great time. We raised money for the youth hockey league up there. The botanical company is participating in curbside service and delivery and all the stuff necessary to help make this easier for everybody too, as is High Level Health right down the street from us.
Yeah.
Very good.
Well, guys, I think it's just been a good night. Hard for me to really come up with any better words than what Rick just said there. So always it's a pleasure talking with you guys. Pleasure seeing you guys, and stay safe. And I think, as Rick said, this will show the true test of our characters. I think we'll get through this. I think we'll be fine.
Yes. All righty. What do you think, Michael?
That's good. I think we got enough.
I just wanted to remind everybody to wash their hands and, make sure that they're not touching their face.
Yeah.
Probably
That goes
also
double for you, Jamie.
smoke their own joints.
Stop touching each other's faces.
Jamie nods, accepting that criticism. Yeah.
Get your hands off of your head right now.
All right, good stuff. Wash your hands, social distancing. Everybody stay safe, and I'm glad we got to interact. We're trying to keep some community connection. That's all we can do. Everyone cooperate with each other, and love is the answer.
Yes.
All right. We'll see you the next time around.
Okay, love everybody.
Well, with social distancing, you can't be loving social distancing. So.
What the hell?
Sending love vibes or something.
For a little while.
Love
for a
to
little
everybody. Good night.
Peace.
All right. Be safe.
All right.
Talk to you next
Nighty
time.
night.
All right. Keep touching my face, too.
The Planet Green Trees Show.
Join the Michigan Medical Marijuana Association today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org. The MMMA is focused on the well-being and safety of medical marijuana patients. The MMMA site provides the most comprehensive and up-to-date news on legal issues, politics, research, cultivation, as well as the various strange products and methods of cannabis use. Come join the discussion with the most knowledgeable and passionate advocates in Michigan today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org.
It ain't fair, John Sinclair, in the stir for breathing air. It ain't fair, John Sinclair, in the stir for breathing air. Set him free, let him be, breathing air like you and me. What's the judge to do? What else can Judge Columba do? We got to set him free. This whole place went nuts.
Oh, there it is. Rick is still talking.
If he was a soldier man, shooting gooks in Vietnam. If he was CIA, selling dope and making hay, he'd be free, breathing air like you and me. What's the judge do? What else could Judge Columba do? Well, we got to set him free. And sure enough, that was Saturday, and then next Monday, John Sinclair walked out of jail. And the Supreme Court issued an opinion in People versus John Sinclair that said, it's cruel, it's unusual, it's arbitrary, it's irrational, it's capricious, and it cannot be the law in the state of Michigan that we treat marijuana the same way we treat opioids. And they set him free. Hi, I'm Jeff Frazier. I'm one of the attorneys at Komorn Law in Michigan. And on behalf of poet John Sinclair, some doctors, some pharmacists, some organizations. We're suing the Michigan Board of Pharmacy to finally, once and for all, to remove marijuana from the Michigan list of controlled substances. John Sinclair was and is a poet provocateur, an adamant opponent and protester against America's involvement in the Vietnam War and all the bombings. He was organized together with Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin and the Black Panthers guys, and he organized against the war. And in his words, we were protesting the war and we were advocating for the legalization of marijuana, all the while smoking vast quantities of it. We ought to do something about finally getting this plant off of the controlled substances list. We have law where the state of Michigan is licensing the medical use of marijuana. At the same time, it says under the Board of Pharmacy says under the Controlled Substances Act that it is still a controlled substance. And not only is it still a controlled substance, it's still a Schedule I controlled substance. And being Schedule I controlled substance means that it is contraband per se, and that its mere presence is evidence of a crime, and it justifies the raids. Michigan State Police spend 40% of their resources going after marijuana that is allowed for medical use, is licensed by the state, is now been voted into law by the people of this state to be legal for adult use. And yet it's still 40% of the police budget, still 40% of the prosecutor's daily load, it's still 40% of the Michigan State Police Crime Lab daily load. And it's still Schedule I, which justifies the stops, the searches, the seizures, and more importantly, the raids. And that means men with AR-15s and ski masks going in where men, women, and children and dogs and grandparents, are quietly sitting there watching TV. And because the neighbor complained of the smell of marijuana coming from a basement window, these patients or caregivers and now any citizen in the state is allowed to grow. The continued placement of marijuana on the Michigan State list of controlled substances is just simply absurd. Hopefully we'll get our hearing. If not, then we'll fight it out in the Court of Appeals and ultimately back to the Supreme Court that originally spoke in the case of John Sinclair back in 1971. It's time for, this absurdity that has forever lived at the heart of the drug war to be done with. And the way to do that is to take marijuana off the controlled substances list altogether. It's no longer to be policed. It's to be regulated. important and historical farm crop in American agriculture has returned after having been classified as a controlled substance and illegal. On December 20th, 2018, the President signed the Farm Bill, also known as the Agriculture Improvement Act of 2018, into law. The signing of the act was great news for the hemp industry, which amended the definition of marijuana in the Federal Controlled Substances Act. Hemp is now defined as the plant, Cannabis sativa L, and any part of the plant, growing or not, with less than 0.3% THC concentration on a dry basis. The plant itself is no longer a controlled substance. Hemp is one of the most versatile plants on earth. From clothing, fiber, paper, building materials, hempcrete, biofuels, CBD, and medical uses, it has been a part of America's industry for over 200 years. Even the United States Constitution was drafted on hemp paper. The time is now. If you're thinking of getting in the farming or processing of hemp, contact our global experts, legal, and consultation teams to make sure that you're on the right road when you venture into the new hemp industrial revolution. Michigan Hemp Industries has been a leader and advocate for the return of the hemp industry, so come be a part of the new revolution in agriculture in Michigan.
Komorn Law. Michael Komorn is one of the top attorneys in Michigan that has experience and dedication in criminal defense law. Komorn Law can take your case from arrest all the way from trial, appeals, and even to the Supreme Court. The team at Komorn Law has the compassion and the experience you can look to for help in your time of need. Komorn Law has over 25 years experience in criminal defense. We have accomplished numerous legislative changes through community involvement and lobbying. Our award-winning law firm has a reputation like no other for keeping overreaching government accountable and in check. We have built Komorn Law for people who need lawyers to stand up to the system, fight back and win. Once we become your lawyer, you become a part of our family. Don't settle for less, just ask our clients. Komorn Law, the best damn criminal defense lawyers, period.